Alright guys, so for our next program, we're going to be asking the user to provide two digits as well as a arithmetic operator. And then we'll go on to proceed in performing the calculation based on the operator chosen and displaying the result. And we're going to be using a switch case statement that we've covered now before. So let's get into it. So from the beginning, we can think of our preprocessors and which ones we'll need. The obvious one that I can think of so far is the IO stream, because we're dealing with input and output. So let's go ahead and declare that includes stream and then namespace creation, and then we go into our main function. So okay, so nothing new so far. Everything's up until this point. And then we start thinking about which variables we need, right? How are we going to store our data? What data are we even interacting with? And I guess you could say we have those integers. So let's say x for the first one, y for the second one, and then we'll store the result of the calculation separately. Then we have a character for the operator entered, okay? And then we can start thinking about directing the users, telling them what they need to do and do. So it's to see out object to print out the screen, and then please enter the first number. Okay. Okay. Then we use the cin object to read that data. Notice the direction of the arrows, and that's the extraction operator, which is saving that data in the x variable. We repeat the process again for the second number. Oops. And that's going to store that on the y. And then finally, for the operator, so please enter a operator example. Adding. I need to put in some skip sequences there. That out. And then I need to change this here. Let's throw that there. Okay, now we get to the switch statement where we can actually perform the calculation. So operator entered. And this is a great use case for switch case kind of structure, because the routing or the way that we're selecting the case that we're going to execute depends solely on one condition on one variable. And that's really when it's great to use a switch. Because if you were to do an if statement, you would have to repeat yourself. You would have each time you go if this, if that, and it would all be the same variable that it's looking at. So it's a bit redundant, and it's a bit cleaner to do it in a switch if it's this type of scenario. So let's define our cases. So the first one is going to be plus addition. Next one is subtraction. Next one is multiplication. And finally, division. Actually, well, I guess you could call it one more as well. The default. We're going to have a default case in case that they don't select anything valid. So we would output a message invalid operator entered. Okay. So let's define our cases. It's plus, so it's an addition. It's minus, the result is subtraction. It's multiplication, so it is addition, of course. And if you guessed it, division. This indenting needs to be input. There we go. A little bit better. Okay. Now, you might have noticed already, but something that is entirely crucial, otherwise you'll be wondering what's going on with your switch statements, is having break clauses. So it's really important to add them in. I've explained this previously, but I will emphasize it. If you, for example, don't add a break clause to the addition case and the user enters addition, this code under this case will be executed, which is great, it's perfect, but it will then cascade down to the next case, and this code will be executed. It will stop here because there's a break clause, because otherwise, if that wasn't there, it would continue cascading downwards like a waterfall. That's really the best way that works for me in terms of visualizing it and remembering it. So if you can think of that waterfall or that cascading concept, it will help you remember that you need to be adding in the breaks. Now, last thing we'll do is we will output the results. Okay. So let's test it out and just see that it works. 2 and 2 plus that's 4. Let's try another one. 5 multiply this time. 25. Let's try one where we don't enter a valid operator. Let's just enter 0. Now we get an error, and I'll tell you exactly why we get that error. Because if you recall back to this point, we define or we declare the result variable, but we don't give it a value. And that can be problematic down here because we actually try to print out the value of this variable, but this variable is undefined. Therefore, you get an error. So you can see here using uninitialized memory result. Now, one way that we can get around that is, for example, doing a check here. So, for example, we can add a Boolean called valid operator. And let's set it to true, okay, by default. But then if this default case gets run and we know that it's an invalid operator, we can go in and say valid operator. Actually, let's put that valid operator chosen just to be more clear. Right. So we can flip that to false in case we don't have a valid operator, and then wrap this inside an if statement. So if valid operator chosen equals true, then publish the results. Okay. And again, as I mentioned, you don't need to do this. I mean, in terms of adding equals true if it's a Boolean, because by definition, it will either be true or false. You don't need to match it to something else, but it's up to you, whatever is easier to understand. Let's try that, and hopefully we've avoided the error now. So 1, 2, and then some random character. Then, as you can see, this ran successfully. And this bit here, the problematic bit at the end there, it was not executed, which means we avoided that error in the end, and our program is a bit more robust.